This is a 2018 Indian Chief Vintage, and it's my favorite Indian motorcycle. In this video, I'm going to show you why it's my favorite, tell you a little history about it and the brand, take you for a ride, and complain about some corporate decisions from Indian that I don't agree with. Let's get to it. Back in 2011, Polaris Industries made a bold move and bought the Indian motorcycle brand. Now I was happy because finally an American company with enough financial power owned my favorite American motorcycle brand. Now fast forward to 2013 and I see this commercial come across my feed. I'm blown away by the simplicity and the message. The new Indians are finally making their debut. The big reveal happened in Sturgis during the rally in 2013. Along with one of the biggest TV celebrities at the time, Mike Wolf from American Pickers, they put on quite a spectacle. The reviews were coming in and they were all positive. The pricing was also much better with the new release. As an example, a 2009 Indian Chief Vintage had an MSRP of $35,499. The new 2014 model was only $20,999. The new pricing put Indian in a much more competitive space. The new design was also superior to the outgoing bikes. Thunderstroke 111 was smoother, more powerful, and much more reliable than the outgoing 105 Power Plus. Styling was very similar, but the new bikes featured better suspension, brakes, electronics, and ergonomics. They also finally had a competitor to the Street Glide in the form of the new Chieftain. Now this bike here is a 2018, and I bought it new. I set it up myself, and I love the rarity of this two-tone color. It's hard to be objective when I have such sentimental attachment to this bike. I say that to put this review in perspective. This bike is everything I needed in a motorcycle. Old school styling, storage, power, comfortable ride and ergonomics, and of course, cool factor. I would love to own an old Indian Chief, but I don't want to learn how to keep it up and running. This is a great alternative for me because it still looks similar to the older bikes from the 40s and 50s, but is much easier to ride and live with. The Thunderstroke engine has proven to be a super reliable power plant, with some riders racking up hundreds of thousands of miles with only routine maintenance. The chassis of this bike is great and provides a super comfortable ride even over the roughest roads. The leather storage looks great, and since the refresh of leather in 2015, it's held up well with very minimal maintenance. As for standard features, this bike has plenty. It came standard with a tall, quick-release windshield, Dunlop Elite 3 white wall tires, cruise control, ambient temperature gauge, passenger seat and pegs, quick-release saddlebags, and enough chrome to teleport you back into the style of the 50s. Now I've added some accessories to this bike to make it more my own. Things like a Clockworks windshield, Pinnacle grips, leather wraps around the Pinnacle floorboard inserts, passenger floorboards and backrest, rider backrest, tan leather storage pouch, leather mud flap, rear bumper, Vance and Hine turndowns, performance machine intake, and stage 2 cams. Now it's nothing over the top, but it's enough to be different from a stock one. Now in 2018, they did some subtle changes, like they revamped the hand controls to a simpler design, and 2018 was sadly the last year for the quick release bags. Otherwise, the only other big change was in 2020, when they changed the rake angle of the front to match the Springfield, and they also gave it the rear air shock from the Springfield. That gave the Vintage better low-speed maneuvering and made it easier to lay over in corners. Now I love the way this bike makes me feel. I don't ride it as much as I would like. I only have about 14,000 some odd miles on it or so, but all of them have been with a smile on my face. Well, maybe except for those few miles when I rode it with the bad voltage regulator. Besides fixing that, the only other thing I've done to it is regular maintenance. Now there are more powerful and better handling Bagers out there with more features, but this one is still supreme to me. Let me take you out for a ride and show you what I mean. All right, we're out cruising, and these are just some back roads out in the countryside, just outside of town. Nice little river right here. Nice sandy beaches. What is this? Town of Ludington. But these kind of roads are really where this bike does a good job. You know, the old Indian Chiefs, like the 40s and 50s, 45, 55 miles an hour, somewhere there was probably a cruising speed for them, maybe. They weren't overly fast. This thing definitely has more power and it'll do the highway stuff just fine. But there are better options out there if you're looking to do a lot of highway riding or cross-country riding. And this bike will handle it. The chassis will handle it. The suspension will handle it. But there's bikes with more wind protection. There's bikes with a little bit better storage availability. And bikes that require less maintenance to look pretty. So if you're trying to keep your leather looking nice, you know, I probably wouldn't do a cross-country trip with it, because you're gonna come into rain and storms and situations that's gonna be a little bit harder on this kind of material. So, but the bike is definitely capable. But what I like doing with it is the back roads riding. That's the type of riding that I like to do anyways. And I'll do 400 miles in a day, you know, just cruising the back roads of Wisconsin, especially down further south in the driftless area. Normally I'm wearing a 3/4 helmet, because I will say at this speed right now, 55, 60, it's not so bad. But at highway speeds, the buffeting from this windshield with my full face, it does get annoying. It beats me around a little bit. But and maybe the stock windshield's a little better. I don't know. I like the way this Clockworks one looks, so that's why I run it, because it's a style thing for me. And you know, that's why I got it. But yeah, power-wise, the 111 Thunderstroke, it's 10 years ago, it felt pretty strong, you know, when you compare it to the other V-twin cruisers out there, and it still is strong. It has plenty of power. It lugs my fat butt around just fine. If I have a passenger my wife's riding with, you know, it lugs us around perfectly good. But the new Power Plus 108 and 112 will definitely outperform it. The 116 does a little bit better as well. You know, this bike does have a stage 2 cam upgrades with intake and exhaust, so it's better than stock, you know. But for most scenarios, the 111 by itself does a very good job, and they're super reliable. Make sure that you're doing your oil changes as required, and really you shouldn't have any issues with the 111 Thunderstroke. It's a great engine. They sound really nice. The exhaust that I have on this right now, it's a Vance and Hine. The turn downs, see, this is a big, there's a big bump there. But it's a Vance and Hine turn down, so I like the way it gives it a very thunderous sound. Rear suspension on this, it is adjustable. I have it sprung a little heavier. But that bump back there, that was a pretty good one. I knew it was coming. I should have slowed down. But it wasn't, you know, I don't think I'm shorter after hitting that. It just definitely felt it a little more than normal. Now this bike doesn't have the playful nature in the corners like a Challenger does, or even a Chieftain does, especially a bike that has a 19-inch wheel up front. But it does fine. It does have a little bit more of a rake on it. It does have a longer wheelbase than the other touring bikes like the Roadmaster, the Chieftain, and the Challenger. Those have more of a vertical position fork in them, which helps give them a little bit more playful feel. And then of course having the bikes that have the 19-inch wheel, that helps even more. But it still handles nice, and it definitely cruises nice. This is a perfect Sunday cruiser. Get out on the, you know, get out and enjoy the weather. Let's see, what else is there? Oh, you know, this bike has electronic cruise, which is a huge deal to me. Lighting at night. This has the regular halogen bulbs in it, but you add those, you turn all your lights on. You actually have pretty good visibility with the stock headlight setup. I've thought about switching out to the Indian LED stuff, but the halogen bulbs kind of go with the style of the bike a little better, I think, and they still do a very nice job of giving you a bright, you know, illuminating the road for you at night. In Wisconsin, we got a lot of deer, and you want to be able to see them if you're doing any kind of night riding or evening riding, and the lights do a nice job of showing you if the deer are there. So good job of the light in there. But again, the reason that this is the #1 bike to me is because of the way it makes me feel. This bike brings me back to a simpler time. You know, I can't help but get lost in imagination when I'm cruising around thinking of the people that rode bikes that looked like this, you know, 80 years ago or whatever, and what life must have been like back then. This doesn't overcomplicate things. It doesn't have all the fancy navigation and all the other stuff. And, you know, I have helmet audio with me, so that's how I listen to music. But, you know, you can very easily disconnect while riding this bike. You know, it is a lot of old bikers, I think, prefer this style of motorcycling in the sense of, you know, you are more one with the bike, I think, when you have a simple setup like this. There is a place and time for all that tech, and there are aspects to all the new tech that I do like, but at this point I don't like it or need it enough to justify spending my money on it. It's funny, I review those things and tell you how great it is, but I really want you to decide for yourself if it comes down to if that stuff's important enough for you to spend your hard-earned money on. Because there's a lot of really good choices out there in the motorcycle world nowadays, and you know, try a few things out, see what you like. I have the luxury of working at a dealership, so I've had a little bit of time on different Indians, so I knew what I wanted. And the number one draw for this bike, for me, was style, and I like this style. So yeah, reliable bikes, they're comfortable. I will say I do have a little bit more room in the cockpit of a Challenger than I do in this, and I didn't realize how much of a difference it was until last weekend when I rode that Challenger and put you know, a decent amount of miles on it. It reminded me, like, oh, this is not, I don't want to say it's cramped, because I don't think it's cramped, but this is probably the smallest cockpit that I'd want to live with. I can still stretch out decent, and, you know, with my rider backrest here, I have nice support, and I'm in a nice, comfortable cruising riding position. But you know, the Challenger, I have even more room, and that bike's even more comfortable to do longer trips with. This isn't bad, but the Challenger is a little bit superior in that aspect of it. Yeah, the things that matter most are where this resonates the best with me, and that's why it's my favorite Indian. You know, there's a lot of sentimental value that goes with that. Like I said earlier, I set this bike up brand new. I took it out of the crate. I did the PDI on it myself. You know, so that's a big deal. It's my first motorcycle I ever bought brand new. You know, that's a big deal. It's my first Indian I've ever owned. You know, I think that's a big deal. At least it is to me. So there's a lot of aspects to this bike that give it a higher value than just the money value. You know, during COVID, these bikes did see a little bit of an increase, just like everything else did. They are starting to come down. I have seen nice examples of these a little bit older years, you know, 2014 for sure, maybe some 15s that are under $10,000, sometimes even under $9,000, and this is a lot of motorcycle for that kind of money, even if it's an older one. The 2014s, the leather will distress a little bit more. They changed the leather a little bit in 2015, so it does keep this look a little bit longer and a little better, while needing less maintenance and less work. But any of those bikes, any of those years are a good choice, and I wouldn't shy away from them. You know, it does have dual rotors up front for brakes. They're not the Brembos like the Challenger is, but it has ample stopping power. You know, this is not it's not a racing bike. This bike does handle fairly nice. There we go. But it has a 16-inch wheel up front, a 16-inch wheel out back, you know, but it holds the road nice. It does good. And every time I stop at a gas station, someone's got to come and talk to me. So I like that. I like hearing stories of people's, you know, old bikes, and that's usually what I hear is, you know, they talk about old Indians that maybe their parents had, or maybe they had if they're older people, you know. It's fun to hear that. I like that aspect of it. This bike makes you more approachable than I think if you had like a standard black fairing bagger, you know. So people approach me quite often when I'm riding this. Got a lot of thumbs up, a lot of looks. So it's a fun bike to own, and it's really a fun bike to ride. So anyway, let's get back to the garage, because I do have some complaining to do about Indian corporate, and yeah, let's get back to there so I can tell you all about it. All right, well, that was fun, but now it's time to complain to corporate. Why did you kill this model? The standard answer is, well, it became a slow seller. I think there's more to it than that. Looking back to 2017, they gave us a Roadmaster Classic. This was a bike that had the features of a Roadmaster with the style of a vintage, sharing even some of the leather bits. Now that bike only lasted a couple years before its demise. Now if I were to think like a CEO, I would try to find ways to produce multiple models that share as many parts as possible. This way, it would help keep the costs down while providing options for your potential buyers. If you have only one model of bike that wears expensive leather seats and luggage, the bean counters are probably going to start to complain. There was also a shift that was really noticeable in 2018 and 2019 to modernize the brand. One big issue with Harley and Indian is they don't have the easiest time getting young buyers in their stores. Pricing is definitely part of that, but style is another. The majority of younger buyers don't want a bike that looks like it came out in 1953. They want something more edgy and modern. Now the Scout Bobber has been a home run for Indian, and then we also saw the refresh of the Chieftain in 2019, giving it a more edgy style. I'm not against progression, but I do believe a heritage model can still exist in the lineup. Now, one can argue that it does in the form of the Springfield, and that's fair, but it still doesn't have the same flair of a genuine leather-wrapped vintage. But the Springfield shares components with other models, like the Roadmaster, making it cost a little less to build and stock parts for. Oh, and by the way, we always sold more vintages than we did Springfields at our dealership, so I don't buy it was the slowest seller excuse. With any large company, there has to be compromise and balance. There's always going to be those chasing the profits, but luckily there are people who also love the brand for its history and do everything they can to make sure it stays evident in the product they produce. The Director of Industrial Design for Indian until 2018 was Greg Brew. Now I met Greg while selling him my personally owned 1986 VFR 750. And he was featured in the early promotional bits and shown as one of the corporate enthusiasts. And he definitely was a motorcycle enthusiast. He was the reason the original 2014 bikes looked the way that they did. And he also had a nice collection of vintage motorcycles himself, including an original 101 Scout. He ended up moving up the ladder and became president of industrial design in 2018. At that time, he brought in Ola Stenengard. Ola is a veteran with the Indian brand, originally working with them back in the early 2000s. Now I've met Ola at dealer meetings, and I can tell you his heart is 100% with Indian Motorcycle and its history. He is the gentleman responsible for the 2022 Chief redesign. He does a lot with vintage Indians as well and has his own company called Forsaken Industries. There are numerous others internally that understand what Indian is to so many people. As long as people like that are with Indian, I have hope that the style I love will not fully disappear. With the 125th anniversary of the brand just around the corner, I have hope that a special, limited edition model could be coming to us. Now, I don't have any insider information. However, I have heard some rumblings, and the timing would make the most sense. I guess we can only wait and see. Anyway, thank you for listening to my rant and watching the review. Please let me know what you think about the direction Indian is going and what you think of the vintage. I will make sure I send a link to this video to some internal people of Indian so they can see firsthand what you think. If you have any questions for me on the bike or anything else, please let me know below. I also have some links below on some things that I mentioned so you can find out more for yourself. As always, I appreciate you watching the video to the end. Don't forget to enjoy the ride. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Now again, this bike is not a racer, but you know, you can have fun with it. Hey, it's not fast, but it has torque. It's fun.